the gal who answered for that. It was bizarre because she was typing the whole time. She's typing the whole time, taking my encounter. And then she asked me a series of questions. And she basically, from the series of questions, deduced that it was not a mountain lion or a bear. And so she said, "I'm sorry, we can't take this report."
Welcome back to another episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. In this episode, we welcome back Chanel from S.P.E.R.O, a Bigfoot research group in the Mount Rainier area of Washington State. What new observation has Chanel discovered while going through the woods and trails of Mount Rainier? Find out this and more in this week's episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of checking in with Chanel tonight. You may remember her from it's been at least a few months now, I think. And we were chatting all about her research out in Washington State in the Mount Rainier area. How's it going, Chanel?
Hey, it's going great. Thanks for having me back.
And since we last talked, you guys have actually come up with a research organization, which is Sasquatch Phenomenon and Encounter Research Organization, correct?
Yes, and we're calling it S.P.E.R.O. We thought it had a neat little ring to it, mainly because one of our first major pieces of equipment we started using was the drone, who we lovingly nicknamed Padrone, like an eye in the sky, and S.P.E.R.O has a ring to it, and we're out in the forest. So yeah, just a little play on words there. But we realized that for everything that we're doing and how much evidence we're gathering, it really started to become a research organization. And with how many people I've been networking with and everything, it just felt right to slap a name on it.
What has happened since we last talked?
So we've gone back out to Mount Rainier, where we recorded those screams and growls and howls. And we keep going back in hopes that we'll hear it again. And it's been so tough going back over and over again, and not a peep, not one peep. So it's very interesting how that works. But what's very exciting is we just went back out last weekend and we heard something strange. We heard a really weird situation. I haven't really told many people about this, so you're one of the first people, but I did get it recorded, and it's really tough because Kevin was excited, and I get it, and he was talking over the audio there. So I only got a short little portion of it, but I am going to be enhancing that so people can hear the howl in the background, because again, we got something that was just out of place. So basically what it was, we'd went on a different portion of Mount Rainier than where we had initially heard the screams, because when we heard the screams, they sounded about 2 to 3 miles away. So we've been pretty much running like a clockwork radius around the mountain within a 2 to 3 mile area outward of where we were. We've just been checking out different sides of the mountain. It felt like we hit the jackpot because all of a sudden, when we first arrived, we heard a bunch of coyotes going off, and we don't hear that a whole lot out here. Coyotes are pretty smart, and I think they're pretty good at avoiding people. And I don't think they're going too close to all the dirt roads. So when we heard these coyotes, they sounded way far off in the distance. And immediately we're like, oh, that's coyotes going off. We got all excited. And then the weird part happened. We heard a howl that was extremely out of place. And now I've dealt with coyotes for many years. I've dealt with different kinds of coyotes too. In Arizona, the coyotes are a bit different than the ones out here. And up in Tahoe, I've dealt with coyotes, up close and personal with coyotes many times. So when we heard this howl, it was long and drawn out and much more massive. Now, had they all been doing it together and we heard just maybe one alpha howl of maybe one big guy, I would have understood that. But what was bizarre was the second we heard that long, outstanding howl, all the other coyotes immediately stopped. That was a little weird. That was a little weird because it was almost like, I don't know, did we hear a Sasquatch letting the coyotes know that they were coming into his territory? I don't know what it was, but it was bizarre. What else was strange was in all the times I've dealt with coyotes, they don't usually come right up to you unless you've got like a small dog and they're used to a neighborhood and they've been scouting you out or something. I think it's pretty odd for a group of coyotes to just come up to you when we were clearly making noise, human noise. We were completely making human noise or being very loud. Any other situation, I felt like they would have just took off or just been quiet, especially after that main howl shut them up. But it was so bizarre because they came up to us almost to the car. It was just such a strange situation. It was like, I don't know. I don't know what that was. And it just seemed very odd. But a lot of people I hear after reading so many reports and poring over so much research online, I hear a lot of people talking about these theories of coyotes and Sasquatch either working together or being heard in the same proximity, or I don't know if their hunting is similar and maybe they're competing for hunting territory. I'm not sure what's going on, but you do find these correlations with coyote and Sasquatch. So that was really interesting. And I did get a couple audio recordings of that I'm excited to share.
The whole coyote and Sasquatch thing is very interesting. It's come up a few times in interviews lately. And mostly it's when I talk to people, it's coyotes and Sasquatch. They're like maybe working together. There is one interview I've had where Mary Fabian was relating a story where they came upon a coyote that had been just mangled by something they believed was a Sasquatch and just left there. And because it had to have been something with opposable thumbs to actually break the neck and back like that. But
wow.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. Definitely that one large, loud howl that just seemed to silence the rest of them really makes you wonder what's going on up in that area. I know you had been also doing some research requests with different organizations in Washington. Is that a thing where they're still sending you things slowly, or is there any updates with that at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, I've been working on an edit with a lot of that information that I'm going to be posting on my TikTok soon. I'm almost finished up with it, and I feel like it'll answer a lot of questions in terms of what we've received. But I will say, yes, they have told us that they're going to continue to send us documents. I think it was every 6 months. I'm not sure why they put time on it. I have no idea. I don't know why. It's really bizarre. So I'll just be honest with you. They told us that they had 90,000 hits when we went to them. I should say when Kevin went to them, because Kevin is the one who made the formal FOIA request. So when he went in there, he said Bigfoot, Yeti, skunk ape, all the various names that anyone would be referring to Bigfoot in these reports. And so the person had emailed him back and said, look, we've got over 90,000 hits for that. They were like, do you want to refine the search? So of course we were like, okay, we'll refine the search. And so we refined the search, narrowed it down to just a few keywords. And it really is bizarre to me because it went from being 90,000 hits to they sent us 35 documents. 35. And then they told us we'll send you 35 every 6 months. Well, that would take us 25 years to get all
good
the
luck.
What is that? It just goes to show how frustrating that Freedom of Information Act is, because they can essentially omit anything that they want to, really. And it's very frustrating because it's like, how on earth are you going to tease us like that? It's been really tough.
Yeah, I could see how that would be frustrating. That was for the entire state, right?
Yeah. which is obviously why there were so many hits.
Right.
Now, I feel like I should just start sharing these theories and these things I want to say before somebody else does, or before people I talk to hit the fan first. But I'll tell you, I have some theories here about what's going on. Obviously, number one is I feel like they want us to give up. This is obvious that this was a huge situation where, it does not make sense to only send us 35 documents every 6 months. Sure. That is ridiculous. So obviously, it's a situation where it feels like they want us to give up. But I really do feel like this is a situation where we're dealing with something classified, because that's really the only way that they're going to be able to omit things, is either if it deals with national security or if it's classified information. Now, I don't really see Bigfoot as being a national security issue. I really don't. Now, that leaves one other option, that it's classified. And I start thinking about it, and the longer I think about it, it makes more sense, because I personally was someone who attempted to make a report when I had an encounter with Katie when we were hiking, because at that point I was not doing running research. I was just on a normal hike. I was just a normal hiker on a normal day. And of course I was stopping and looking at Bigfoot stuff. And that was the day I had actually filmed that cave. And so I was into the Bigfoot in that moment, into the Bigfoot thing in that moment, but it wasn't like a serious research day. It was just me hiking. So when we had this terrifying encounter where all of a sudden, boom, the ground's being pounded so hard that it's making the ground shake beneath our feet from 30 feet away, and something's beating its chest at us and pounding the ground, that was terrifying. And it was obviously a massive animal, or at least that's what it felt like. And initially, before we heard the chest beating, before that moment where it beat its chest, it was just the pounding on the ground. And your first instinct is to turn around and look for a grizzly bear running at you, because I can't think of anything that could be large enough to make the earth shake from 30 feet away, unless it's a grizzly bear running full speed, pounding the ground at you. And so instinctively, that's what we were looking for, was a grizzly. And grizzly are making their way back into Washington. And I had found some massive bear tracks out there in the snow. Instinctively, I'm thinking, gosh, this is a bear. But then obviously, as the encounter progressed, it clearly was not a bear. However, I felt it was my duty as a hiker to either warn other hikers that are going to be in the area, or let Fish and Wildlife know, let, whatever Forest Service or authorities need to know that there was a potentially aggressive animal encounter that I'd had. And if there is an animal there that has the ability to attack someone, I think it's their duty to make sure the hikers are safe. And so I attempted to file an official report. And essentially, they wouldn't let me. And that was the part I was so shocked about. And it was also bizarre, because the whole time I was telling my story to the woman at Fish and Wildlife for the aggressive animal encounter report, the gal who answered for that, it was bizarre because she was typing the whole time. She's typing the whole time, taking my encounter. And then she asked me a series of questions, and she basically, from the series of questions, deduced that it was not a mountain lion or a bear. And so she said, "I'm sorry, we can't take this report." She goes, "But I'll let them know. I'll let everybody know, but I can't officially take the report." That was the part for me that was such a huge red flag, and kind of reiterated for me that I do think this may be a situation that's classified, because if reports were allowed to be taken of these Sasquatch encounters, that would mean they'd be legally required to share said reports.
Yeah, and it makes you think, if you can't take it as an official one, if you take it as unofficial, where do the unofficial reports go?
Exactly. And that's where my little undercover interview comes into play. I posted a few videos on my TikTok about me. I just said, whatever, if we have to just do this off the record or undercover and I can protect people's identities, I'm going to do it. So I changed everybody's voices, made sure to protect everybody's identities. But we had a guy right there in the main office, there were a bunch of people working there. And I said, can I speak to your supervisor? And he'd been there for 15 years. And he told me to my face, and I got it recorded. He said, oh, yeah, we just delete those emails. We just delete those reports, or we send them off. Basically, he said, we just send them off and they just disappear.
That's wild. Oh, my goodness.
They just get deleted, he said. He just said it. He goes, oh, yeah, we delete those ones. And I'm thinking to myself, so you're telling me hikers have terrifying encounters with massive animals and you just delete that and that just goes away? And this is the point where it's, okay, we gotta do something about this. This is not okay. I really hope at some point we can find a way to, I don't know, figure out how to properly work with Fish and Wildlife and Forest Service to start recognizing the possibility that the species exists and therefore allowing reports to be taken.
It's almost like you have to somehow intercept the people that are going to give reports to them and be like, hey, talk to me instead.
Yeah, no kidding. I think that's what people are doing. I think, and you know what? People like yourself, you really are an outlet for those of us who are either turned away.
Yeah.
And we just have to share our story elsewhere. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And also for people who are afraid. There was a moment of hesitation where Katie and I sat there in the car and we really thought about it. I thought, should I report this? We really thought about it. Because of course, I don't want to bother authorities with anything that's petty or stupid. Right? I would only bother authorities if I felt that someone could be in danger and someone's life could directly be in danger. That was the only reason I would ever be contacting authorities. So we really thought about it. And I can only imagine how many people have thought about it and decided, no, I'm not going to go to the authorities, and how many more stories are out there. And I'm really glad that, like I said, that you're doing what you're doing, because now we are starting to hear these stories more often and people are feeling less afraid because now they realize there's a community of us that are avid outdoorsmen and hikers and hunters and campers, and it's happening. It's really actually happening, and it's not just make-believe stories and made for TV. It's really occurring.
Oh, absolutely. Have you considered maybe doing a second FOIA where you focus on a geographic area like Mount Rainier or a state park in that area, etc., instead of the whole state to see what happens?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. We've thought about a number of ways that we can just blast out a ton of requests, just file a ton of requests. But the problem is, what good will that do us? We're definitely going to do that. We're definitely going to do it anyways. You can't just say no to something. We're definitely going to do it. But I got to be honest, with the joke of what they sent us on this one, I think it would just be the same kind of joke stuff. They're just sending us junk emails and silly links to like stories and articles that are it just basically is like employees joking about Sasquatch back and forth to each other.
Sure.
And it's bizarre that they would do that because we requested reports.
It really makes you wonder. Since the last time you were on the podcast, did you have anyone reach out to you after hearing your interview?
Absolutely. And it's really cool because it almost seems like every week I have a new person that reaches out to me and is just really curious. It's the way their tone is, that they were non-believers before, or they thought it was all just silly, or they thought it was all just hoaxy baloney. And then they hear my story. And I think when people hear sincere stories and they hear the tone in your voice and they hear how serious you are, it makes it very real for people. So yes, definitely. I've had a few people reach out and be like, wow, this is pretty crazy. And I'm like, yeah, you're telling me.
No doubt. Do you guys have any contacts with anyone on Native American lands in the Mount Rainier area?
No, not specifically. Not specifically. It would be fantastic because, man, there are so many private lands out there that are just untouched for hundreds of years. We go out there sometimes and we'll just look out over a ridge and we'll think to ourselves, nobody has stepped foot over there in hundreds of years.
It's wild.
It's just a fact. It's just a fact. And, I think maybe a lot of people will get upset with me about this because, I don't know, I'm quite outspoken and I'm pretty firm in my opinions because I usually formulate my opinions based on research and experience, real world experience. But a lot of people hate me for my opinions, but whatever, I'm going to say it. I think there's this great lie told in society that there's not enough. There's not enough land. There's not enough room. There's not enough forest. There's not enough. There's not enough. There's not enough. There's not enough. Whatever. It's just like this great lie that's told that there's not enough because I go out to some of these remote locations and as far as the eye can see is nothing but untouched wilderness that for a fact nobody has gone out there for, like I said, hundreds of years. It's really funny because I think people get into these narratives and it's almost fear-based. I think there's a lot of fear of why people are not going on hikes more often. People will be like, gosh, I can't believe you hike. Like, you afraid you're going to get eaten by a bear? And I'm like, I've been face to face with bears many times and they're totally not aggressive. It's only going to happen with a black bear, but black bear is not going to just attack you for no reason. I think there's just this huge notion of fear that we need to stay out of the forest. Don't even hike in the forest because you need to leave Bigfoot alone and you need to leave the forest be. And listen, do we want millions of people going hiking on the same day and destroying the woods? Of course not. But a lot of fear holds a lot of people back from actually getting out there and experiencing potentially, you never know, it's just random how it happens, but getting out there themselves and experiencing what we're experiencing. Because the more you're hanging out at home watching that Netflix show, the more you're binge watching the TV show, the more you're sitting at home indoors, the less time you're having out in the woods and the less time potentially having an encounter. So it makes sense to these people who spend their whole lives not getting out on hikes and not going out camping and not going out in the forest. It makes sense why they sit online and dictate from their couch and say, this isn't really happening. You guys are crazy and this or that. And it's like, all right, man, get out in the woods and go see for yourself, really is the point I'm trying to make here.
It's such a good thing to bring up because I would have to say a lot of the listeners have never even gone to a local state park or a state forest in their area. And you look on a map, there are so many, almost every state, they're out there and usually you can get to them for free. Be prepared, but worth checking out for sure. The thing I like about you is that I know you are constantly researching. And the thing I like about research is when you start to notice the same little thing starts to pop up in different areas and you start making connections. Have you started to notice anything lately about Bigfoot that you've just been like, that's weird. I keep seeing that come up and there might be something there.
Yes, you're full of great questions tonight, which I really appreciate. Sometimes it's easy for me to get overexcited and lose my train of thought. So this is perfect. It's fantastic you should bring that up because yes, there is one specific oddity that I've noticed that I'm very aware of now. And now I look everywhere for it and I crack myself up because I'm like, okay, yeah, I feel like now I can confidently say this is related to Sasquatch. So we obviously already loosely, a lot of people in the Bigfoot community already know about tree breaks, right? And we know about the perfect 90-degree angles or the way in which these trees are unnaturally broken or seemingly unnaturally broken or no other possible way in our known world, our known physical world for these things to be happening, right? So we already knew about tree breaks, but I don't know if a lot of people know about the treetops missing. The treetops just completely missing. this is so strange to me. When we go out, we hit so many dirt roads. We go down endless amounts of dirt roads, and some of the dirt roads are so tight, the bushes are coming in the windows. And oh my gosh, I need a new paint job on my truck. But we started noticing that the tops of these trees were missing. And what was odd about it was that they looked like they'd been twisted off. They didn't look like they'd been cut with a tool at all. They didn't look like beaver teeth markings or anything of that nature. They didn't look like wind damage or snow. It didn't look like when the snow gets real heavy and packs down and breaks a tree. We even considered, because a lot of it was on the side of the roads, we even considered maybe this is the result of the snow plows on a certain season coming by when the snow's real high and the plow will just accidentally chunk up the trees that are on the side. But none of it made sense because we would measure height. We would measure, okay, the snow plow is going to be here or the snow. And then we thought about there wasn't even that much snow on these last few seasons. So we started to factor in, obviously, as you do with research, like what makes sense and what doesn't. And so nothing was adding up. The fact that these, and they're usually either baby trees, they're either new, young pine trees with the top completely twisted off and the top nowhere to be found. Not chewed off, not hacked off, twisted off, crudely twisted off. And we've tried to do it ourselves. You can take a piece of a branch and just twist it till it comes off. Can't even do these things are healthy, like thick, strong. You'd have to be sitting there for 3 hours. And I just don't see people. It'd be one thing to find one or two of them, and maybe someone was bored for 3 hours and twist the top of a tree off, but it's happening so often that that's not the case. And the other ones are not just these little new young pine trees, but it's also these thinner, longer trees. And I really need to find out the exact species of tree that it is, because at this point I need to figure out why they're using these specific kinds. But they seem to be the same type, where they're the really thin, branchy ones that kind of just a bunch of branches sprout out from the ground, but they're really thick and strong, and they're usually pretty healthy. They're not like old dead ones. They're usually pretty healthy ones, and they're usually about, I'd say, 2 inches thick. They're not too thick. They're not like huge sticks by any means, or branches, I should say. But it's just so bizarre because they'll be twisted off at, I don't know, 7 feet up, 6 feet up. Just the tops twisted off. And it's bizarre too, because it almost looks as though they're happening in like little chunky areas. So how do I explain this? So let's say you're driving down the road and you look over to your left, and 6 or 7 of these thin, wispy branches that about 5-6 feet up, sometimes 7 feet up, almost looks like someone just went through that one little specific patch and just twisted off all the tops on that one little patch. Then you drive down a little ways further and maybe 2 miles down the road again. But some of them will be older. Like you're like, that looks like those ones were twisted off the season before. So it seems like we're seeing evidence of these seasonal twist-offs, and they're happening all over. And if anyone wants to, I challenge anybody to just pay attention the next time you're out on a hike, or pay attention the next time you see a bunch of these thinner, smaller trees, like almost like bushy style trees. And just pay attention when you see the breaks and you see the way the trees naturally break and fall. And that's what I've been doing lately. That's what I was saying earlier. I've been doing that lately. And you don't see that. You're not going to look around, and normally in an average area where you wouldn't think Sasquatch would be, you're not going to see that. You're not just going to look around and see trees twist with the tops twisted off up at 5 and 6 feet. It's just not normal. So I challenge anybody to tell me what they think that is. And at this point, I do have a lot of video evidence of that I do need to share as well.
That is fascinating. I'm going to keep my ear out for that as well. Twisted off that high up in bunches of groups like that, man, really makes you wonder. Right.
It makes you wonder. And sometimes there'll be a big group of them that have been twisted off. I don't know, 50 or 60 of them. That's when we thought maybe it was a plow, because we're like, this is a lot to be packed up. But no, it must have just been a good area. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I've pondered what's going on here. And I think my closest theory, my instinctive theory, is that these, not the pine trees, but the thinner, wispier ones that I just described, I think maybe they're using those for nesting, because they seem like they'd be good for weaving. I'm thinking if I'm 8-9 foot tall, 700 pounds, those would be the right size for weaving for me to make something sturdy but weavable.
Very interesting. Yeah.
So I get excited now when I see those, because I think, wow, are we near nesting grounds?
Definitely keep me posted on that. After the last time that I chatted with you, did you have any people reach out to you with feedback about the audio that we played at all, with thoughts on that?
Yes. Yeah, I sure did. Yep. Same thing. It was like people who really didn't believe were just, I don't know what this is. This is really crazy. What is this? I think people assume when you say, I've got audio Bigfoot, they assume they're going to listen and it's going to be coyotes, or it's going to be a fox or a mountain lion. And that is what happens a lot. And I've made that mistake as well. At one point, we thought a couple of barred owls were Sasquatch whooping at us. But what happens to the best of us, that we mistake other animals for creepy, mysterious things, maybe even possibly cryptids. When people hear it and they actually play the audio and they turn it up and they listen, and I've got a few versions flying around now on my Instagram, because things change once you enhance them and the feedback gets really crazy. And I want people to hear the different versions I have so they can understand that I'm being very transparent here. I'm not trying to edit anything or hoax anything. So I think when people hear it, they hear the number one comment I actually get is, I can hear how scared you were.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
That's usually the number one comment. So I think, coupled with the fact that, number one, they can't tell themselves what animals they're hearing. And number two, they hear how terrified I am. Yeah, people have been hitting me up. Whoa.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm just waiting for the one person to contact you and be like, you know what? I heard that same thing in the Pacific Northwest, and you know it's going to happen one day. That day will come. I just know it will.
And you know what other day that I'm excited for is for us to get it recorded again at closer proximity. I do have faith, and I feel very excited about right now. This is the time when it's just beautiful out. We're finally getting sunshine. We're able to get out there now way more often than we could, obviously, in the winter, and a lot of the road closures and stuff and weather. And so now we're hitting it again 1, 2, 3 times a week. And I just feel very confident that if I continue the same pattern of vocalizations and calls that I was making that got us that recording, because I do believe Kevin's a little in between. He's not too sure. I do appreciate that about him, that he doesn't just cater to what I'm thinking because we're a team. I like that he obviously stays firm in his own thoughts and theories and what he thinks happened, or if, anyways, he thinks it was a coincidence. He does. He's of the mind that it was coincidental that we heard those screams that night, but I'm not. I firmly believe that the reason they gave us that grand display had to do with the fact that I had been making Sasquatch calls all over that whole mountain the whole day. We had driven that mountain for 6 hours, and I was hanging out the window at every turn. I pretty much lost my voice.
Wow.
And we have a silly term for it, but we call it chumming. It's like we're chumming the area. We want them to know. And I also want the Sasquatch in the area to get used to hearing my voice, to get used to hearing what my specific Sasquatch call sounds like, because I want them to remember. I want them to remember that night that we heard you. We heard you hooting and hollering, and we hollered back. And I can't wait for that to happen again. And I do feel confident that it is going to happen, especially after last week. We were out hooting and hollering and making our calls, and all of a sudden coyotes start going off, and we hear the main big guy just howling top of the lungs, super loud, way out of place, not a coyote howl. So I got very excited because I was like, oh my gosh, is this going to be a thing now? Are they going to? And what's unfortunate is I don't know truly, can't know unless you do the research, and you can't know unless you actually get out there and do it. But I can't know for certain if they're making these calls aggressively, if they are mistaking me for another Sasquatch for a territorial dispute. I don't speak their language, so maybe I'm accidentally screaming F you to the Sasquatch.
Yeah, you don't know. That's a good point. Yeah.
I don't know, but what I do know is we have to move forward with getting better footage, quality footage. We have to move forward with getting quality audio. We need more than just Ron Moorhead's recordings. It's been way too long.
Yeah, exactly.
So I am doing what I need to do in order to get that. But I'm also trying to view this from an aspect of wildlife photography. So there's a lot to it. There's a lot of angles.
Have you guys been integrating any new technology or devices as part of your research since the last time that we talked?
I don't recall if the last time we spoke, if we'd had the thermal already. We use the thermal a lot now.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. I don't recall how long Kevin's had that thermal, but in the beginning, we were tinkering with it, trying to get used to it and see how it worked and make sure we know how to dial it in just right. And we both feel really comfortable with it now. And so I'm hoping Kevin still needs to do an upload, but I'm hoping that we got it on camera because I was still figuring the equipment out. That's one thing people need to understand too, is you need time to figure out new equipment when you buy it, right? So I was struggling with figuring out while I was looking through the viewfinder, figuring out where that darn record button was. I kept hitting the wrong button. So I'm praying that we got it recorded because something was standing upright on 2 feet, hiding behind a tree, and not hiding well behind that tree. And it was bizarre, and it was large. And of course, it was on our way out. And it was very late, and we'd been out there all night long. And we tried to back up and get it again. And by the time we slowly drove by, and I go, stop, there's something there, hit the record button, and I'm hoping I got it in time. And then we backed up, and it was gone, completely gone. We absolutely could not find it. And I'm talking, we're looking through thermal. But the problem is that people need to understand with thermal is incredible, right? You hear thermal, and you're just like, cool, you can see everything. Not true. Someone can hide behind a nice, wet, thick, dense tree out here, and the thermal goes blind. You can't see them. And these woods are dense. So the problem is for us to really get something solid on thermal, it is going to need to be close, and it is going to need to not have much coverage, which is really tough out here. Everything pretty much has coverage because, again, like I said, we backed up and it was gone. Couldn't see it. Too thick.
Wow. Was that in the similar area that you recorded those calls, or a completely different area?
Yes, indeed. Similar area. It was later on in the night, similar area, because we had to move on because we stayed in that area after we heard the howls and whatnot. We stayed there for, I don't know, maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes. And you can only linger so long before you start to think, am I just hanging out for coyotes? What was that? And you got to move forward. So we went on for a couple more hours, 2-3 hours. And then on the way back out, not too far from where it was where we saw that. I'm just so excited because I know the more we do this, the more we have boots on the ground, really out there a lot in the Bigfoot capital of the world. We're gonna get stuff for everybody. I know how tired everybody is of seeing the blurry photos, the bad videos, the pixelated reshares. And I did mention that on my Instagram, that I'm trying to bring original content only. I'm trying not to do a bunch of blurry, pixelated stuff that, I don't know, that just isn't really benefiting the research community. I'm trying my best to only bring what's going to help move this thing forward. So right now, I'm really just working with those audio recordings. That's my baby right now. So I can't wait to get more. And of course, the second I get more, I'll be posting it and showing everybody.
That's awesome. It has been a extremely fun time catching up with you, Chanel, and I'm so glad that you contacted me. Before we head out, are there any final thoughts that you would want to share with the listeners?
First of all, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me back. And I guess my little parting message to everybody would be keep an open mind to having your own experience in going out into the woods, obviously safely, and do it in a smart way, and don't go by yourself, obviously. But for people who want to get out there and experience it themselves, just listen. Just pay attention and listen. And the longer you start to spend time in the forest, listening, watching, paying attention, noticing the small subtleties of the forest, really soaking it in and just growing in your outdoor connection, that's when I think people start to realize that there are more Sasquatch howls and growls and grunts and just general noises that are occurring that I think people aren't even realizing, or maybe even don't notice because they're just, I don't know, distracted, or maybe not out there enough, or maybe on their phone or listening to the headphones, or I don't know, just all the things that may happen to where you miss it because it's easy to miss. It happens very quick. It doesn't last long, very few and far between. And that, I think, is a big contributing reason to why we have so little hard evidence, is because it happens so quickly like that. And the more people that really start to pay attention and listen and observe, I think the easier this will be for the general public to start really absorbing and grasping that this is very real.
I agree. How can people get in touch with you, Chanel, to share any information that they may have that would help you out in your research?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram, and I've just started posting things on my Instagram in regards to Sasquatch. Yeah, everybody can find me on Instagram at Squatch Search. I was shocked I was able to get that Instagram handle.
Yeah.
But it's Squatch Search, just as it sounds. And I'm also on TikTok, and that one is Cluephoria. And I always tell everybody my Cluephoria stuff is also just my recreational, fun fan fiction stuff too. So I have a little bit of both on there. But if you're looking just for Sasquatch stuff, Squatch Search is the area, and I will definitely get your message if you write me there.
Thanks so much for coming on again, Chanel.
Thank you so much for having me.
After the recording of this episode, Chanel's TikTok on FOIA requests in Washington state regarding Bigfoot was picked up by many large news outlets, and many of her research-related TikToks disappeared off the platform. This removal was not initiated by Chanel, and she is currently trying to figure out why her information has been removed. We at Bigfoot Society will be following this story and providing you with updates. Thank you for listening. Become a supporting member of the Bigfoot Society podcast by going to www.patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society and receive extra episodes and early ad-free episodes as well. If you've got a personal Bigfoot encounter you would like to submit for me to share on the podcast, please head on over to www.bigfootsocietypodcast.com. There you'll find the Share Your Bigfoot Encounter form a little lower on the page, and please take a minute to share as many details as you can. Please state if the encounter is anonymous or what name you would like associated with the encounter. And as always, thanks for listening.